Todd is chair of the Library Information Technology Group at the University of Florida, and he will be talking about the intersections between the library and the broader campus, something Emily touched a little bit on, but Todd's going to go into some more detail there. So, Todd, if you want to draw up your slides.
Sounds good. I will.
You're set to go.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and thanks, Todd, for the invitation to come and talk this afternoon. It's a really timely topic and one that I think as librarians and as technology leaders we're dealing with in an ever increasing manner, and that is how to handle our privacy of our patrons, of our data, and especially in this growing age of interconnected systems. And just to give you a little background, where I'm coming from, I've been a librarian since the mid-1990s and worked in both libraries at smaller state institutions and larger statewide systems, now at a research institution at the University of Florida. And so I've had a lot of experiences, but I've worked technology on all those from a librarian standpoint. And so today I'm going to talk a little less on technical type of features and more about our relationship with privacy and how we address it when looking at new systems at a campus, and a large campus that has additional supports in this area. The one thing, I just want to give you a little bit of background about the University of Florida so it lays some of the groundwork. We are the land grant, sea grant, space grant institution of Florida. Fall 2019, we had over 56,000 students, overall over 5,000 faculty, academic staff. We pretty much have a degree in everything, actually, except for a master's in library science. Florida State has that. So, but we have many programs, so we serve a diverse audience. And then being the land grant, our extension network, we have staff and personnel and basic constituents throughout the state of Florida. We are located in Gainesville, Florida, which if on the screen right now, if you can see the little star in the sort of north central, which we call north central Florida. So I'm not over in the panhandle right now. We are not getting drenched with rain, and we are staying away from the hurricane. So for those, we're pretty safe for those for hurricane statuses. For the libraries, we have 10 library locations, over 6 million volumes, over 1.4 million ebooks, 145,000 journals, databases. We have extensive collections both on campus and online. We have our Florida Digital Library collection, which has, actually this is a little number, probably about, we've done a lot of work over the past few months, even being remote working, all of us. And so we're closer to probably 15.5 million items in the digital collections. And for my department, I manage all the technology within the libraries. So we manage servers, we support staff workstations, mobile devices, digital technology all around. So both hardware and software. We manage all the library web presence. We do custom library applications, and all the digital library infrastructure is managed by my unit. The one thing that we do not manage is the public workstations, which actually campus uses. So any of our student accessed workstations throughout the libraries, our campus IT does that, our academic technology friends with campus technology, and they that was mainly done for a consistent approach to the student experience when it came to workstations, and it's been working good. We have a really good partnership there. Now, getting to the subject of today's presentation, we are talking about privacy in the age of surveillance, everyone's concern. With my presentation, I'd like to focus on how the university libraries address privacy concerns in today's more broadly disintegrated information systems that we use, and not only for us, but throughout the library communities, and then to provide these services to our students. You know, we want to make users use our systems and feel that, you know, they have a seamless approach to accessing them, and that things work smoothly, and that they're easy to access, and increasingly we can do that, but our systems are being connected even more and more ways as we do this. As we operate, though, uh, as part of a larger system, which is our university, and then our university, given that it's a public university, and it's a state institution, also falls under the state. So we have many layers, and I always think back to, it was earlier in my career a couple decades ago, and I listened to Joey Rogers, who was the president, I think, of the Earth Council at the time. And she talked about value, and your value where you sit is your value within your larger organization. The same way when it comes to how we operate and support our larger community and then the state in general. One, I think, important, like I worked in Minnesota before, and we had a bit tighter public access laws for record laws. One important note about Florida is that we have very broad public record laws, which are known within the state as sunshine laws. Most data, if it's open and if it interacts with a government level at some point, becomes open and accessible. This makes us even, I think, more conscientious about what data we collect and then how we think about personal data and those we serve, and which kind of context do we save data or interact with data, because we know at some level, depending on what it is, it could become publicly accessible or requested at some level. Given this context, I wanted to mention that, like many college and research and public libraries, we are very sensitive to privacy of our user data and activities. To a degree, we tend to fall on, I would say, the side of exposing and collecting less on purpose, just so that, because we just don't want to risk the possibility of our user data being exposed. Now, this might limit our use of it, but it also, I think, serves our mission and makes us more comfortable. Speaking of the libraries, privacy, the page right now is just our privacy policy homepage that we have on our website. And so, but in this page, we have, we generally outline the ALA's code of ethics, in our commitment to privacy. We mentioned that. We also have all of our different privacy use policies, and they are all different. One thing, since I mentioned earlier about Florida and very broad open public information laws and open access, Florida does have a statute, though, that says circulation records are confidential. And so at least for those type of privacy issues, we are at least backed by state law. But we highlight all these on our web pages. We try to get that information out there for anyone who wants to view it. And similarly, the campus itself is how we working with this broader community and the broader campus, and that's my discussion this afternoon. And I would think it's really come to increasingly more common that campus entities and campus IT this is becoming more and more important. And it's because over the past decade or so, I think we have seen this increasing vigilance on and control on what types of data are being accessed and used. With the possibility of data breaches and exposure of data, that can lead to lawsuits or that can impact research funding or other things. Our campuses are, I think, much more prescriptive on how we implement technology in our systems across campus. As seen, I think, on this slide here, the campus has a wealth of resources, and I don't know how many people go to these sites and look anything up, but they're there. They have, training, they have incident reporting, and then their multitude of policies that they follow. So this is one aspect of, as we work, we have to fit our policies and underneath sort of the library's umbrella or the campus's umbrella in this area. One thing that has come out of the last decade or so in this, and the university has taken a big lead is providing what they have called the university's integrated risk management system. And what this is it really tries to provide three overall goals. They're concerned about ICT security, so they want to really vet technology and services. And then they it has now, expanded, so they've not only done IT, but they're actually using the system to cover the vetting of any privacy and legal issues that come up. So they bring in campus legal, and then they're also looking at enterprise alignment and normalization of technologies. Uh, I think historically we've had, and this is not uncommon in many large research institutions, that there was a very much decentralized IT infrastructure that was fragmented and all across campus. Now, a lot of that is still exists today, but there's been an increasing effort to bring a better alignment across campus for technology and both to serve the students, staff, faculty across, the researchers across our campuses with a more standardized approach, which really does help back up, you know, making sure systems are implemented and in a secure and safe manner. Um, I think within the University of Florida, a lot of the emphasis on enterprise alignment started anyway as they looked at, there was two major ITs, the campus IT, and then there was the health center IT. And bringing those together to be more common was important, but this led to other alignment efforts. So with the integrated risk management, it really falls, you know, these are the three goals of this. Well, what does this really provide me as a subunit or subgroup, IT group on campus? Well, in practical ways, there's three main focuses of this integrated risk management. One is a data guide, which it's both practical in identifying specific data use cases that, you know, in the educational role helps us understand the types of data that people are using, and it comes up with a UF data classification guide. And it also helps identify, as they vetted software, it helps actually identify, given your type of data, where what applications are approved for that use on that data. So if it's open data versus sensitive versus restricted data, things like that, it'll actually help funnel you and guide you through that solution. Campus, sort of piggybacking on this, Campus has developed what they call their Fastpass solutions guide, which allows users to search for already vetted software and systems that have been approved. This allows users that are working with non-restricted data to be able to use software without additional review by any additional UF administrative compliance or risk management offices. Finally, there's the actual risk assessment intake system, which is the main system that we use and that I facilitate for use from the library standpoint on new software and technologies. So for a closer look at, you know, just as examples, what does this data type guide mean? Well, it provides an interactive guide that a user, which in this case would be me, if I'm working with a library researcher or working with a department within the library, we look at the data and we say, okay, what kind of data are we actually interacting with? And we can check these boxes out and then find out, and it'll tell us, okay, well, this is PII, this is public, you know, private information, or this is restricted because there's some sort of patient level confidentiality on it. And it'll actually help vet and guide us that way, which is hugely important, because a lot of times we don't know how our data is classified. As you know, in libraries, we most of the time we are so familiar with saying, well, it's open data. You know, even in our efforts to scan material out of books, it's open data. But as soon as we go into it could be into like university records, and then we're doing some retrospective scanning on materials and looking for a project to put that through. Maybe there was social security numbers in that scanning process. So understanding that what you're working with and what risks you might have is important. So it's actually a pretty valuable guide. The Fastpass solution was the next part, and this is actually it's become really important. It took a while to grow. It started about 3 years ago, and there was a limited number of software packages being put onto this, but now there's over 450 software solutions put onto this, and it just continues to grow. But this really has allowed a much more streamlined process to enable faculty and staff to see if there's a vetted solution that will meet their needs without having to go through that next level, which is the full risk assessment intake. For the library technology services department, just being able to work with and even our procurement people saying, you know, I would like to purchase something in this area. Here's a couple packages. Has this already been risk assessed and on the Fastpass? Being able to look it up quickly and say this one is, the procurement can happen much more quickly that way. So this is what this looks like. And actually, as you would go through it, here's a screen. I'll say what EndNote Premium looks like. It's already on the list. And so it's already been vetted by legal for certain types of data operating environments. You can see this. You can see this actually has, you know, for open data, there's no action required. A researcher could use that. For sensitive data, it's also been vetted for use that way. Now for restricted data, if you got that classification on your data type, then you would actually have to work forward and submit a request to use it. So that can be documented. And so everyone understands what that is. And these are really nice tools that that the campus has worked really hard at to try to get in front of some of the risk, and especially when it comes to privacy and for not having to have that internal expertise and not having to actually work through all the different nuances of a new software package, but using these tools and also using the office that supports this effort really helps from my standpoint in library and technology leadership to really be much more responsive to the people we serve and being able to respond quickly or actually get ahead of that and say, no, nothing's here. We're going to have to do a full risk assessment. So I'm just going to talk about a real world example here in a second. But over the last 3 years, I would say we've processed dozens and dozens of both library related software and hardware systems. Everything from brand new purchases. So if we want, we put in a new self-checkout system. Our old ones, you know, they aged out. We had to buy a new self-checkout system. We had to risk assessment, you know, and it's risk assessed for both the hardware and networking, how it's going to plug in, how it's going to communicate, what's the operating system, but then also the software that's being used and what systems it's talking to. So there's data diagrams that we need to come up with to show how the data is moving. But then the legal folks also get involved and look at the licensing to make sure that it's meeting, you know, has it been, you know, does it meet our needs that way for them if they have to litigate it at some future level, you know, so that mitigating that risk is what they look at. But we've done things like our easy proxy system, or even our locally developed systems, like our digital library system that was locally developed. We have put that through this risk assessment process. So initially it was really about new purchases and new software, and now they're retrospectively going back and making sure that most systems on campus or other, you know, software that's being used has went through the risk assessment cycle. So like I said, but everything from people counting systems in our libraries, those were put through risk assessment. We have kick scanners, even our outsourced digitization efforts. These are kind of an interesting one where we want to use a new vendor. Now, since it even has something to do with data, they say, well, our procurement people say we want to hold it up. No, if you're going to outsource digitization, and actually in this case, we were outsourcing some video digitization, and they came back and they wanted to put it through risk assessment. We had to understand who was going to have control of the hard drives when, what type of data was going to be on there, or, you know, were they new hard drives versus old hard drives, and were they going to be plugged in? All those type of security issues were addressed through one of these risk assessments. So it does take quite an effort to do them, but in the end, once we've done this a while, we know the questions to ask up front. So we're actually way more prepared to do these moving forward in the future. But they look at the data, they look at data residency, like I said, the legal agreements. The one example, though, I did want to share, and this actually just came up. This is how I'd say they're starting to be much more proactive, our campus IT and risk assessment office. 2 weeks ago, I got an email saying from the lead risk assessment person, who's an associate CIO at some level, said, you know, we noticed on your LibGuides that you list all these citation management systems. And of course, being that the LibGuides are produced by the librarians, and we have, I don't know, 70 librarians, they're all putting material out there as they want. And these are the various citation networks. They had help guides to these. They had links to training coming up that would be using them. And they said, what, this one psi wheel, it hasn't been vetted. And interestingly enough, I had not really gone through the citation management systems. It's sort of, they've just been running. And a lot of times like the Zotero and the EndNote and the Mendeley, even, I don't think even the libraries put them forward necessarily originally, but another unit on campus said, we use this, let's put it through risk assessment. So they are, all of a sudden they were on that Fastpass solution. RefWorks I list just because we're transitioning away from that. But the side wheel was an interesting one. It had name change. I think it was Faculty 1000, F1000 was the group. It might have been named before. But they said, oh, it hasn't been risk assessed. And we're not too sure. It looks like it's a London-based company. We're not sure if they're able to change their legal agreements to meet our needs. And so the UFIT came to us and we had a good discussion about this. And we said, well, we'll start a risk assessment. We'll put that into the hopper and move that forward because our librarians want that. There's a certain clientele across the campus that must use this. And we will work, and if there's any hurdles, we will address them at that point. But the interesting one that they said that we hadn't really thought of is that when we're promoting software and packages to our users through things like libguides, like EndNote, which I shared the Fastpath solution to earlier, is that we are saying download it and you can use it, but we're not really pointing them back to say, download and use it, but it's been approved for these types of data classifications, and it hasn't necessarily just been openly approved. So they actually said, we would like you to start denoting some of that so we can educate people on the different data types. Now, citation management systems are, usually managing citation, and I think that, some of their concerns were especially on some of the unvetted packages, or even some of the ones that have already been vetted, is that if we don't tell users, maybe they're going to be starting to store some of their research in that, which if they're health research or if they have patient data somehow, they might be, uploading that to the system. Normally, citation management systems don't necessarily work that way, but so it's a back and forth on education on systems and how we use them. But it was a good note that saying, as we promote things to our users, there's extra steps that we can do for education so that they're aware of the different types of data and classifications and how they're being used. So it was a really good exercise. We came to a resolution. They didn't say, take that down, don't point to it. They just said, let's start the process and let's expand some of your information. But, it might come to the point where we have to transition away from a certain software package if they do find issues with it. So it was very informative, but this is the first time that they've actually come out and actually contacted us and was proactive with us. And so it's been a learning experience for everyone. I think I just wanted to wrap up with some benefits, I think, of this type of approach. And I think a lot of campuses have this. It may not be as robust of an office that provides these services, but there are entities on campuses that look at legal agreements. We do not need to be necessarily figuring all these out ourselves as librarians, and usually, they're the ones keeping up to date on the latest, and they know the state regulations better. They can keep up on all these different aspects. So it's been great for us. Also, it's increased the library staff's and library technology staff's awareness of the nuances to be aware of when implementing these new technologies. A lot of times we just go to maybe not the last 6 months, but we're at an ALA or an ACRL or something like that, and we go to the vendor booth and this is a great solution, let's implement it, and they come back. Well, there's a lot more steps to that. So being aware of what they are and is hugely important. I think the challenges, though, and there's many, they, I don't want to say we're just unique because, well, everyone likes to say they're unique, but campus IT, I don't think always understands the unique library use cases of technology systems we use, and that these systems may not necessarily always align with campus-wide systems. Like I said, we don't just choose one citation management system and say this is good for the campus. There's unique cases where people want to use multiple different ones, and being aware and being adaptable to that is important. Another challenge is we really need to get in front of future technology initiatives and planning, especially with grant processes. because grants have a timeline in, and if we haven't scoped out that there may be a 1 month period, if it's a tricky risk assessment, it might be a 1 month period before we get a decision. And so having that and actually putting that into that planning process is very important, because it definitely can increase the time to adoption and prevent future adoption, prevent adoption issues if things arise. So um, I actually send reminders. I have it on my calendar, send twice a year reminders out to all library staff, just saying, just remember there's a risk assessment process. Here's some resources you can look at. But if you're going to be coming to us with a technology need, understand that this is part of that vetting process that we really don't control very much. We can help that person facilitate it with campus, but we don't control the decisions on that. And that's really pretty much wrapping up. I would like to say that I think in a time where more applications use data and are capable of some sort of surveillance, I especially see this with mobile technologies and mobile apps. I think it's always good for us to be vigilant, be on the latest sort of discussions on this. And I think sessions like today are really good because we get a whole bunch of different viewpoints on what's going on, how we're sharing data, and then I, but I also think that we do work within the larger organizations, and we're finding out that sometimes we think we have a unique use case, and we go to campus IT, and they say, "Oh no, we already dealt with this with, the School of X, because they had a similar thing, and we've already vetted that." So sometimes, just being aware of that and working and building those good partnerships really can help us out. And that's the other thing. Just I'd like to mention on is in ending is that this is all about people and relationships for the most part, even though there's bureaucratic structures involved. A lot of this is being able just to pick up a phone and say, okay, tell me how this is going to work, or I have this idea, I need to get this through. Is this possible or not? And that's really done with good relationships. So I would like to thank you, everyone, and I'm open for some questions.
Great. Thanks, Todd. Want to remind everyone that if you have any questions or comments, use the Q&A functionality. If you're in a window, that's down at the bottom, the Q&A, or if you're in full screen mode, click on the green bar at the top. That'll bring up um, the control bar where you'll be able to use the Q&A functionality. Um, when it comes to you had about halfway through your presentation, maybe 2/3 of the way through your presentation, you had a UF data guide.
Yeah.
And one of the questions was like, or one of the responses was, I don't know, which I expect is probably something that a lot of people like, I'm not so sure. But I'm wondering if over time, as you've been talking to your community, like has the number of people who respond I don't know changed?
I think people are becoming more aware of this, because I think, we've increased, even our professional expertise within the libraries has increased. We have a data management librarian, we have an informatics librarian, um, we have actual, dedicated people looking at these areas and doing education in those areas. But I think that at a certain level, a lot of times research is usually new a lot of times. So if I'm going to do research, I have an idea. Um, and people really still don't exactly know. Even you can, with those categories, you can choose them, but some people might have mixed categories. They're not exactly sure where things fall. And so, like, what does it mean by student data? If there's some broad categories, they know they're just grades or grades, and is it, you know, so there's a lot of, I think, variance in what people having. So I think it's going to be less, but I really think that um, I think there's still a need. And the nice part about that is if you hit I don't know and you go through the whole process, you actually end up with basically, here's the people to contact. Feel free to reach out to us. Let's talk about this more.
Mhm. Um, and have you noticed a difference in the adoption or uh, the approach of different departments or departments or elements or divisions of the university or the campus? Um, is one more engaged in this vetting process, or more, are there people who are more proactive and more less proactive?
I think there is, and I think that there's also a huge backlog. When we met with these risk assessment folks, they actually showed us their backlog, and School of Engineering, School of or the medical school. There's a huge number of sort of backlogged risk assessments in place. Um, so I think as it becomes more in just the vernacular of the libraries and the IT directors, especially across campus, that it just becomes a standard talking point when we talk to faculty about new grants, when we do talk about new implementations of items, both hardware, software, anything like that. This idea of it's just part of that process. So I think this has really been a recent, like I said, over the last 3 years, this has really grown, and there really wasn't much, like 4 years ago, there really wasn't much of a process at all. So it's fairly new and it's growing fast, but it's constantly and getting this in front of people so they're thinking about this. And a lot of times we'll come back with, you know, a normal risk assessment, even on a new software, if it's open data and there's no concerns and the license looks good, it can be, 2 days later we get the approval for it. So a lot of times they're not drawn out, but it's really good. It's part of just become part of the discussion, I think, and the planning processes.
Yeah, it's nice to see that there's sort of in the same sort of way that privacy by design has become an approach to thinking about privacy as something that you need to consider when designing systems,
Yes.
like this building your process into the ecosystem of software acquisitions or systems implementations. It's just like, oh, it's just part of the process that
It is, and from my experience, if I look back 15 or 10, 15 years ago, a lot of times, just because it was possible, IT, it's like campus IT would be like, oh, we need to tie these two systems together, and we'd come back and they say, yeah, I've released all the attributes because I could, and now this is a different level of IT involvement from campus. It's saying, no, these are all vetted and discussed beforehand and agreed upon. So I'm seeing an evolution of even campus IT and the IT mentality with regards to privacy, things like that.
yeah, no, we're making progress.
Yes.
All right, Todd, thank you so much for your talk.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Um, Great.